Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is this cute floral arrangement, beautiful pink tulips in a lovely glass jar, and I'll show you how I make the entire card, including the background. Stay tuned. Okay, for today's card, I've got all my supplies ready. I'm going to use this cute sentiment from Inkylicious Stamps, and it says, "It's the friends we meet along the way that help us appreciate the journey." Super cute. And I'm going to use this flowery stamp from silicone, well, it's a clear silicone clear stamp from Global Land. I think I bought it at some kind of craft fair. There is a reference number on there which I'll just show you in case you want to try and find it, but I bought it at a craft fair. Quite a versatile set with a jam jar. It's got stems and then different floral tops, and then also this cute bunch of tulips, which is what I'm actually going to use today. So they're the two stamps I'm using. I've also got my anti-static pad so that I don't get any problems with stamping. I've got my Arteza pens, which is a nice set that I bought a while ago. I've got some purple kind of glittery sparkly card, my stamping platform, and of course a piece of watercolour paper. I'm using a 9x20 because I'm going to do a tall card today. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop that in my stamping platform and work out where I need to put the flowers. Today we're going to be using masking fluid, which is an interesting technique, an interesting way of using masking on a card. I'm just going to grab that and I'll show you what that looks like as well. So this is a liquid. It's just called masking fluid, and basically how it works, you paint it on and you let it dry, and then you can stamp or spray over the top of it. You have to then let that dry, and when you finish you can then peel it off, so it's masking without having to cut out. Imagine having to cut out a mask for that. There is a hell of a lot of cutting in there, and you've got some very tall small spaces between. That's where masking fluid works out really well. Okay, so first thing I've got to do is work out where I'm going to place things. So let's grab this stamp out of here. And I'm going to be using the jar and the tulips. Just pop that back in. Okay, so one thing to do when you're placing or working out where to place, keep the clear plastic that you get either side of the stamp on the stamp, just in case there's any residue ink on the back of the stamp, which could then ruin your paper. So I'm going to do that here, and this one I'm just going to place roughly. Now, did I actually get the jar out? Yes, I did. So the jar will go kind of there, and I want to just do a tall, simple card here. That's about right. Just looking at the placement, I want to get it kind of just in the right place. Come on, that can be quite tight. I'm going to stamp that later. So the first thing I'm going to do is stamp the flowers in the jar. So I'm going to stamp the flowers first. Because the jar is clear, you can stamp on top. There's no need for any masking at all there whatsoever. Right, I'm just placing that roughly in the middle. I'm just looking at the gap either side. There we go, that's ready. So making sure I've got my clear side selected on my stamping platform. Just pressing that down. And then I'm just going to use my little anti-static bag just to make sure there's no fingerprints or grease on my project. So the ink I'm going to be using is basic VersaFine Onyx Black. So I'm just going to give the stamp a good coating with black ink. What I'm also going to grab is my clear emboss powder, which I keep in a Tupperware, because I'm going to be embossing everything, because I'm going to be colouring stuff. So I want it to be water fast, and I also want nice raised edges that I can stamp up to or colour up to. Right, so I'm just pressing that down. Let's have a look what we get. I'm going to need a couple of inks. And when you ink it up, stamp it with all different parts of the pad, because ink pads tend to dry out in the places they're used the most. So just give that a couple of stamps, rest your hand on it, give it a moment or two for the paper to just take the ink. There we go. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to take that out. I'm going to dip that in my clear emboss, shake that off, and then, apologies for the noise, I'm just going to heat emboss that, and then I will stamp over the top of that now with the jar. Just letting my embossing gun warm up. I'm just going to give that heat everywhere, and you can see the magic happen. Embossing like this is really useful in your colouring because it gives you a slightly raised edge to colour up to, and I find you make less mistakes. So I think always good practice. But also it just gives the black a real gloss, and it just creates a more definitive image, I think. Always heat the front and heat the back. There we go. Just let that cool a sec. Then let's pop that back in here. Again, because I've just done that, I'm going to go in with my little anti-static pad again, because I've handled it. And now I'm going to pop my jar on. Now I want the flowers to be kind of propped up by the aperture on the bars. Okay, so that's roughly in the right place. Before I can do that, I just need to clean off my flowers. I've got a cloth that I keep in a Tupperware. Just going to give that a wipe so it's ready and clean for the next time. Good practice to always clean your stamps as you go along. Don't leave them dirty, because you'll find the build-up of ink will affect the quality of the images that they stamp. Okay, let's now grab this one and then just give that a stamp. Cute set, very versatile. There's lots of different things you could do with this. Pressing down, see what that looks like. I think I'll probably just give it one more, although that does seem to have stamped quite well first time round. There we go, that will do. Again, into the embossing powder, tap it off, pop the lid back on that before you knock it everywhere and make a mess. And then again, let's heat it before we do anything else, and just set that ink. Apologies if my camera goes out of focus while I'm doing this, but I think it's useful to show every part of the process. There we go, and heat the back. Right, that's our image. And just going to clean this off. There we go, they can go back on the start set. I think this is one that I will certainly get my money's worth from. Okay, I'll put the stamping platform away just for the moment. We will need it again later, but not right now. Right, just give that card a little bend if it's curled slightly. Okay, now masking fluid. So this is just basically a liquid. Give it a shake, open it up, and you can see it's just a blue kind of liquid. What we will need though is a very fine paintbrush. Just looking in my tub. What have I got? I'm just going to pause 1 second while I go and grab my small paintbrush, which I think has been cleaned. Right, I have my little paintbrush. This is the one I want to use, which is quite fine. You can see it's got quite a fine end, which will allow me to get into all the right bits. Okay, so all we do, take some masking fluid on the brush, and we paint over the areas where we don't want colour to go. So kind of work your way around. Don't be scrimping on using the stuff. You want a decent solid layer. So it takes a little time and you have to be patient to do it, but you also kind of need to just work systematically around the image. So in there, I think everything's going to be painted in that section. If you go over one section more than once, that doesn't matter. Better to do it twice than forget it and then ruin your project because you've missed a piece. Do sometimes get gunky bits. Just take them off with a piece of kitchen towel. Now, this is a strange liquid, but it dries and leaves almost like a plastic coating. It's rather strange. Proper artists use it for masking areas of a project in watercolour and other mediums. So it's actually an artist's fluid, but you can get it. I got this from Amazon. If you do make a mistake, the easiest way I've found to fix it is with a piece of kitchen towel and the end of the brush. Just give it a little wipe. So and you'll see as it starts drying, it kind of goes, well, it's hard to describe really, it's sort of lumpy, and you can see everything has a blue sheen on it. You have to be patient though. You cannot do anything with it until it is fully dry, and you can't heat dry it either with a heat gun. It has to dry naturally. So I will be filming this video in a few segments. What I'm going to do once this is dry is I'm going to create a background for this card with Distress Oxide sprays, so I get quite an interesting speckled kind of pattern effect. Also take it off with your finger if you're careful and your fingers are clean. But yes, I'm going to spray the whole background to give it a load of colour, and then I'm going to paint these tulips quite a kind of vibrant pink and purple colour. I'm making a real mess of this today, but you see you can take it off with your finger if you're careful. I'm trying to do it quickly so that this video isn't way too long. To make sure you get like the stems, and that's the beauty of masking fluid, because you'll get colour in between these small holes, which you'd never achieve with just normal masking if you cut card or plastic. So I think I've done the whole top. One way of checking is if you lift it up and hold it in the light, you can kind of see the reflection and the shiny. That confirms where you've been. So it's quite useful to do just to check what you've done and what you haven't. Okay, so I think we've done the top. We just need to now do the jar. Well, obviously the jar is a much bigger area, so we're just going to do that quickly. So I would typically dump a load on and just work my way around. Probably do all the edge and then pull it into the middle. And then don't forget turn your project so you're always working the best way for you to paint. You're right-handed, you probably want to pull down on the left-hand side. It dries quite quickly, probably takes, I don't know, half an hour to dry. So you will need to just have a little bit of patience. Okay, let's have a look now. So holding that up to the light, you can see, hopefully it's glossy in all the right places. Okay, so that's our masking done. You will see that this goes funny, it goes kind of lumpy, which is strange. It goes like almost like a putty. But that's how it works basically. It sort of creates this putty effect that then stops whatever you do on top of it working, so, or getting through it. So just kind of doing its thing really. But I sometimes take it off the top here. It's a very strange material. It's like a plastic. Always make sure you wash your brush. And I think in the advice it does say to wet your brush to start with fairy liquid, but I must admit I don't usually bother to do that. Okay, just cleaning up my masking fluid as I go. Right, at this point I will stop the video and I'm just going to let that dry. Okay, my masking is dry. You can see it's got a sort of silvery sheen to it, and when you touch it, it's not tacky, so that's fine, that's ready to go. We're stepping out of our normal comfort zone here, so I've got my little spray box, which is just an empty box that I use to spray in. So I'm going to pop it down the middle here, and I've got 3 of the Ranger Distress Oxide sprays. I've got dried marigold, spun sugar, and speckled egg. An essential thing to have when you're doing this is a damp cloth. So I've got my usual damp cloth that I use to remove inks. So I'm going to start with my dried marigold. Always good. Give these a shake before you start. Obviously take the top off. And what we're going to do, we don't want too much colour, but what we're going to do is kind of spray around. Literally a couple of sprays. As you use each one, give the top a wipe, and you'll find your fingers also get a bit dirty, so give them a wipe along the way. I also usually wipe inside the caps. They do tend to overspill, so it's good to keep them clean as you go along. Okay, that's the dried marigold. I'm now going to go in with a little bit of the spun sugar, probably more at the bottom. What I found with these, if you spray slowly, don't press it down too quickly, you get the spots, and I want spots, so I'm sort of pressing it down a little slower. There we go. And you can see already we've got some quite nice colour on there. And then I'm going to go in at the end just with a little speck of egg, just kind of at the bottom, just to give it a little bit of contrast. Again, I'm doing it slowly. Maybe at the top. There we go. Again, give that a wipe. Check the state of the lid. And also give your fingers a wipe. Right, I'm just going to dry this now. So I'm going to grab my heat gun and I'm going to blast it. It'll take a while. This ink, this spray ink, it does sit on the surface, so it takes quite a lot to dry. But I'm not getting too close because I don't want to melt the masking fluid, but I need to obviously dry the ink. I'm just working my way kind of systemically across it, giving it all the heat. me just show you. This is quite awkward. I've got the camera arm kind of hanging off the desk. It's a little bit awkward to say the least. But there we go. So you can now see you've got quite a nice background effect there, but you can see a lot of that ink is still wet. So what we're going to do is just lay that on the desk, get rid of this box, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, back on the desk, and you can see that looks quite nice. Obviously I've got quite a lot of light here, but that's actually got quite a nice effect on the background. So what I'm going to do, just to dry that off, piece of kitchen towel, and literally put it on. And that will just take, you can see the excess ink off basically. So I typically would do it with a piece of kitchen towel, and then normally a piece of scrap paper as well, just to make absolutely sure. And just rub it over. Okay, see, that's taken still a lot more off. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to just give it another little dry with my heat tool, just on the lighter setting. We just want to make sure that is completely dry. Yeah, it's feeling dry to the touch now. I'm going to dry the back. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stamp the sentiment onto the bottom, because again, that will just give the masking fluid more time to dry. Well, or the ink to dry on top of it, I should say. Okay, so let me pop that back in here. Just handle it carefully while it's still maybe kind of wet. I'm going to use my anti-static pad because obviously we've just been working with wet. Just to give that a little bit extra, and then use this cute stamp, which I have used a lot. It's a really nice stamp. So I'm just going to lay that down roughly in the middle, get it kind of level. Okay, I think looks pretty good. One way to check if you've got it level is take your plate out of your stamping platform and just look at the rows. That it's got straight lines on it, so you can use those to kind of just check your alignment. I think actually it needs to come down a little bit on that side. Okay, so I'm kind of looking here and here. I'm looking there. Okay, I think that's roughly right. Put that back in. Okay, let's go for it. And again, we're going to heat emboss this just to give it a real vibrancy. This will probably take a couple of stamps because that paper, since we've sprayed it with that Distress Oxide spray, is going to be hungry for ink. Okay, so first impression, you can see it's dark at the top, but it's not dark all over. So as I say, it needs a couple of stamps. Put that down and give it a press. Got my tub of clear emboss. This is the Wow Ultra Fine. There we go, and that now looks fine. So I'm just going to dunk that in. Tap that off as normal. Using my heat gun. And you'll really see it here, because you'll definitely notice the black gloss against the colourful background. go. So there's our sentiment added. Right, before I do anything else, I'm going to clean my stamp. And pop that away. Right, we're done with our stamping platform now. We don't need that again. So I shall pop that in this drawer. Okay, now we reached the crucial piece. We now need to remove the masking fluid. So this is an interesting thing. I've actually got some embossing powder on this, but I'm not too worried about that. If it gives it a little bit of extra sparkle, that's fine. Look, you can see. I should have actually just gone over it with a paintbrush really before I did it, but it doesn't matter. So what we need to do now is remove this. Now, the way you remove this is just with your finger. But what I have found when using these kind of inks, it does tend to take the colour of the ink, which is sitting on the top of the masking fluid, and it can colour underneath. It's supposed to leave it completely clean. But in this instance, it kind of doesn't matter because this is a glass jar. If it has some of the orange colour behind it, it would anyway. So I think it's actually fine. So I'm just going to start with a piece of kitchen towel, and what you'll see, here we go, you kind of pull it off like a film. So you can see it comes off in kind of one piece. It's, as I said, it's a very plasticky product, and it comes off like almost like a plaster. I quite like the satisfaction, if I can, of getting it all off in one piece, but that's not going to happen. So basically, you just rub it off like this with your finger. And this is the moment of truth where you find out whether you did actually paint everything, which hopefully we did. If you kind of missed any area, or you painted over an area that you shouldn't have, you can always go back in and touch it up. I can see here, like I've gone over the edges there, it's not coloured in that area, but I can just use my paintbrush and just paint a little bit in that area. There we go. So that's what we're left with. You can see it's kind of like eraser type rubbings. And then once you've done that, I would just get a clean piece of kitchen towel and just give it a good rub. Just to make sure you've got everything. So up close there, you can see you've now got a white area to work with your colours against that quite interesting background. This is an area where I've missed. So what I'm going to do is probably just get a small paintbrush and my mister. Just going to spray a tiny little bit of water on the surface there. Get my paintbrush wet and go in here. I'll probably lift some colour from somewhere else. There you go. You can see I've dirtied that up already. You'd never know it had been missed. How easy was that to correct? Okay. So now we're going to do our colouring. So I want this in kind of purples and pinks. I'm going to take a vibrant purple. This one is light magenta. I'm going to take kind of a middle of the road purple colour. This one is wisteria purple. I'm going to use just those two colours really for the actual flowers. And then I want a green for the foliage. So I'll probably just take kind of a mid green, which is olive green. Got obviously my water brush, which by the looks of it needs water. I have a glass of water here beside me, so I'm going to try and fill that up from there, which is going to be interesting. There we go, there's enough there to work with. I've now got a wet leg, but I can live with that. Okay, so we've got some water in our water brush. So I'm going to zoom in actually, just so you can see how I colour this. So I'm going to move my camera down. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to start with the blooms and work my way down. How I want this to look, I want a strong colour at the base and then a fade to the end. So what I'm going to do, I'll start just by putting a bit of purple, kind of following the lines of the flowers to the edge. I do probably 2 or 3 at a time. Obviously be careful because you're working with a really vibrant colour. But depending kind of how confident you are with a paintbrush, work at your own speed. So that's my purple. What I'm going to do is turn the card around, because it's always better to pull away from you. So take your brush, take some of the colour and bring it to the end. We want colour all the way in the flower. So you've now wet the flower. If you now work your way down, just dabbing slightly, what you'll find is that you kind of start to pull that intense purple up the flower without getting it too coloured. Use your kitchen towel, take the purple off, and then kind of work back. And what you'll find is you push the colour back down. What you end up with is intense colour at the base and a lighter colour at the top. Once you've done one, you can sort of change the way you do it. If you're confident, go straight in with the colour and then sort of fix the blend at the end. You can just do it up and down, but I find it's quite good to kind of pull it up, and that way you get a bit of a gradient of colour. If you're getting too much colour, just take some off. You can always do that as well, dab, and that will take colour off as well. So just work your way kind of methodically around. I mean, various ways you can do this depending how you colour, but this is kind of the way that I tend to do it. Lay some colour down on the whole flower and then pull and push for different intensity. I do love these Arteza pens. I tend to use them all the time for anything natural like animals or flowers. So I'm going to work my way around. I'm just going to do the other flowers. This is my favourite part of card making. I love colouring. There we go, there's all our purple. And then just work with the colour. You see I'm dabbing. It just pulls a little bit of the colour up. Obviously makes some maybe more intense than others. There's Mother Nature. Everything's not the same. And always have a piece of kitchen towel next to you. Definitely need it when you're doing this kind of work. Okay, I'm just going to take a little bit off there. That one's quite bright. There we go. And that gives it a bit more subtlety. Now, what I would do normally at this stage, I've done with my dark purple. I'll take my mid purple and just go in and give it a little bit of kind of medium colour. What you notice there is obviously the ones that are dry, it kind of sits on the surface a little bit more. The ones that are wet, it kind of fades in a bit. There we go, just blend that in. we go. I've got very intense colour, which is quite nice. And very vibrant against that background, obviously. Okay, so we're finished with our two purples, and now we're going to take our green. So for this one, I'm going to take an acrylic block, and I'm just going to put some colour on the block, and then I'm going to use that colour to turn this brush to make a very fine point. And hopefully you can kind of see how fine that is. Because what I need to do is get into some very small places here. So I'm just laying colour down on the stems. I'm actually doing these directly with the brush. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, and then I'm going to just take that down into the jar. I've coloured one there that's not actually a stem. Here, that's not a stem. So I'll just wet that and take that off. Okay, and then go back on the one that actually is. There we go. You can correct mistakes, which is good. And then what I'll do with this colour that I've got on my acrylic block, I'll actually use my water brush, because the leaves wouldn't be quite as dark and vibrant as the stems. So I'm just going to give them slightly less paint. And again, I've just gone over the edge there. So how I would fix that quickly is I'll squeeze some water from my water brush, and then I'll just go over the edge and then dab it with my kitchen towel. There you go, that takes that off. Right, back on the green. And obviously if the colour becomes too watered down, just add a bit more. We need a bit more. You can also just take water off the brush on your kitchen towel. Don't rush this part, because obviously this is the piece that can really go horribly wrong. I'm doing it fairly quickly, just in the interest of not having a video that's 26 hours long. And then maybe go over individual segments. Just to give it a little bit more contrast. Maybe actually use another green. So I grab a different green. This one is parakeet green. Put that next to it. What I can then do is just mix the two together. Load up my brush, take a little bit off, and just maybe give, there you go, slightly different green in there, just so we've got a bit of variety. Okay, right, clean the brush, so just literally squeeze some water out. What we're going to do as well, we're going to need to do something with the water. So what I will probably do is take a light blue, which is something like a Arctic blue. And then what I want to do is just get a slight orange in the background. So I'll also take orange. Using the other end of the acrylic block, I'm just going to put a little bit of orange down. And then I'm going to squeeze my brush to add water because I don't want much colour. Take that off, just give that a slight orange tinge, just to reflect the colour of the background. Dry that brush, and then similarly, just a little blue to reflect the fact that this is actually water. That's too much, so I'm going to just squeeze some water on there and then just thin that down. There we go. That looks pretty good. Just hold that up so you can kind of see it in detail. But we've got just the faintest hint of orange behind. We've got the blue in front, and the flowers all look quite nice and vibrant against that background. So just dry my acrylic block. Pop that back on the shelf. My water brush. I have actually got a set of 3 water brushes, but I'm still using the very basic one that came with the pen. So I'll just put those back in their container. I'll just move you back up a little bit. I've still got these in the actual original packaging they came with from Arteza, but I definitely recommend these. I think Lavinia do a set of watercolour pens as well, but they are very useful if you come from kind of a painting background, which I do. They're a really nice way of working. Okay, done with those. Okay, so that's the main imagery of our card done. Looking quite nice. What I'll do now is I'm going to mount this. I'm going to actually, first of all, I'm just going to dry it a little, and then I will mount it on probably that purple paper, just to tie in obviously a frame with the purple of the flowers, and then onto a white 9x20 DL card blank. Just drying that base. That was the last thing I painted, so obviously that's the wettest. No, I'm not using the second heat setting, just using the top one, the light one. There we go, I think that's dry. We'll just do a piece of clean paper, yeah, that's good. Okay, cool, right, grab your purple. So I've got my purple paper, and I'm just gonna do that basically. So I'm just gonna clean my work area a little bit. Actually, I've got some powder on there. Make sure that's dry. Okay, so I've got my double-sided tape. And I'm just gonna stick this down, trim it, and then finish it. Be mindful where you put your projects down when you put them down face down. I know this paper is clean because I just took it out of the packet, so that's actually not a bad place to put it down. If I put it down on my cutting mat, that's had all sorts of inks and things on it, so that's when they get dirty. So just be mindful of that sort of thing. Now, because that's had a lot of water on it, I'm actually going to put quite a bit of tape down the middle just to hold it down because it might start pinging up. Right, I'm going to take my tweezers and just pull the tape off. And then I'm just going to eyeball it. So I'm picking the corner, I'm roughly lining that up as I go. Just going to give that a press around the edges. There we go. Then my craft knife and my ruler. Again, just doing it by eye. Holding that down. And then at the bottom, now I've got to be careful here because I've not got much to work with, so I need to hold that down really steadily. But this ruler does have a foam backing, so it does have a kind of grip, which is good. There we go. Then I'm just going to grab a 9x20 card blank. Just a standard card blank. Fold that in half. Use my bone folder just to make sure that's in the right place. There we go. And again, this is a clean surface, so I will put that on there, and then I will use that to just do the tape. This time around, I'm only going to put a little bit of tape in the middle to position it, and I'm going to do the famous bunny ears trick so that I've got a bit of wiggle room when I put it down, because I've got to get this absolutely in the right place on the card blank. Okay, check your card blank just in case there's any dirty marks on it or anything. Looking good. Okay. So now let's work this out. So just drop it gently and don't press it at all. Just wiggle it around. That gives you that option to correct it. There we go. Pull the tapes. Let's stick it down. I always go around with my bone folder, just pressing down each layer, to make sure we don't have any lifted edges. There we go. Right, and the finishing touch on this one is going to be glossy accents. I'm going to zoom in again, just at the middle there. So I'm using this product, Glossy Accents, which card makers would be familiar with. It's a gel that sets clear like glass, and I'm going to use it on the jar because I want to give it a glass effect. So when you put it on, it comes out like a gel. You can direct it using the spout. Again, turn your project rather than try to do stuff upside down. And you're kind of squeezing slightly. And you're aiming to get a solid layer. This looks cloudy at the moment, but it dries clear, as I will show you once it's done. If you get any air bubbles, just tap into it. And that usually gets rid of them. Okay, so I've got a fairly even layer, I think. There, I can just show you. You can see how wet that is. That now needs to settle for a little while. I have actually got a little air bubble there. which is refusing to pop. But what I'm going to do is put it on the flowers so that you don't really notice it. Okay, there's our card, pretty much finished. Obviously we've got to wait for that to dry, but once it does, hopefully that will look nice and glossy, and I will show you the finished product. And here is our finished card. You can see now the glossy accents has dried and left a lovely glossy effect on the jar, and you can see overall all the colours have now settled down. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click like and maybe subscribe to my channel, where you'll find other videos showing either techniques or entire card making like this one. If you're interested in my cards, I do sell them on Etsy, and I can be found on Etsy, Instagram and TikTok under the same title, Crafts by John UK. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.